Okay, well, let's move right on. We have kind of laid the tables, set the table, so to speak, I believe, for hearing from a number of farmers. You know, we recognize that in order to achieve a lot of these goals, it's going to be our land managers, the ones that are making this decision. So it's really important for us to get their perspective and input. And so that's really why we wanted to put a panel of farmers at the very front and center of the first big item for our 2-day annual meeting. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave Lamm, who's going to lead the panel. Dave is our lead educator, soil health trainer for the Soil Health Institute. He came to the Institute after some 40 years of experience working for USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service. And the last position he held with them was their team leader for their national soil health and sustainability team. So he lives and breathes soil health. I'm sure he dreams about soil health at night. And so I'll turn it over to you, Dave. And I'll take this opportunity to thank all of our farmers panelists for joining us today too.
Thanks, Wayne. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to be part of this meeting, annual meeting. And I appreciate Mora's dog because I got one at my feet too. And that's just kind of the way things are in this COVID age that we're in. You know, this is a really good opportunity. I echo what Wayne said. Getting the farmer's perspective right at the start of this annual meeting is really important because we've got a group of producers. I'm going to give you an overview because I really want to get into the questions right away. We've got 5 producers who represent farming or managing over 20,000 acres of cropland all the way from Scotland Neck, North Carolina, which is on the East Coast, to the high plains of West Texas out by Lubbock, Texas. They raise anywhere cotton, they raise corn, soybeans, small grain, wheat, rye. They also raise some peanuts in there, along with some other specialty crops such as sesame seeds and grain sorghum. And we even got one producer who's dabbling with some organic cotton out there, along with one grazer. It's important to touch that grassland out there with soil health. Some of the common things they're doing, most of them are doing some no-till, some strip-till out there. Talked a lot about cover crops. Using single species, multi-species. They're doing that, but they've also found that they could adjust their nutrient and pest management strategies that we'll get into. And there are some of them doing some unique things, such as seeding cover crops with a split row planter, if you know what that is, terminating them by rolling them down, maybe with a roller crimper. We've got one producer who's actually doing some grazing on his cover crops and doing our grazing producer is actually doing some mob grazing or rotational grazing, which we'll get more into. And the thing here, I'll echo this because water, 70% being used by agriculture. Well, that's not dispersed evenly. We've got some of our producers get 45 to 50 inches of rain. And then we got one poor farmer who gets less than 20 on the average if you look at annual precepts for their area. Now, that doesn't mean that 50 inches of rain comes when they need it and in the amount they need it and the intensity that they need it. That has nothing to do with it. That just means they get a lot of water, maybe that they have very little control of. So what I want to do is just introduce them real quick, and then we're going to dive into some questions. I want to remind folks, if you have a question, go ahead and type it in. We'll try and respond to those as we go along to give more feedback there. So starting off, we got Zeb Winslow, who's from Scotland Neck, North Carolina. He farms with his dad on about 800 acres up there. Rupert Burrows is from Kingston, South Carolina, which is down in the Charleston, Myrtle Beach area. He farms his family farm of about 300 acres. They're on the coastal plain. If you're in that area, you'll hear that term. Jesse Fly is from Truman, Arkansas. Him and his dad and his brother farm a rather large operation in the Mississippi Delta region area, about 15,000 acres. And then Jeremy Brown is out there by Lubbock in Dawson County, farms about 5,000 acres and around there. And then our lone grazer is Michael Dickey, who farms around Greensboro, Arkansas, about 400 acres of primarily grass up that way. And that's just right north of Little Rock. So I kind of bring that out. So I kind of give you a geographical perspective of that. So let's just dive right in, gentlemen, and let's get some. Hopefully, this will be a nice discussion rather than just answering a bunch of questions. But for the first question out there, agriculture is pretty successful. We feed the world. We have big yields on that. With that in mind, what drove you to look into changing your system to manage in a more soil health incentive or management type of system? And Zeb, since I know you longest, I'll kick off, let you take that one at first. And then we'll just kind of go around the table here, if that's all right, folks. So what made you start, Zeb?
I guess, David, the thing that kicked me into it was curiosity, and also combined with help from our Soil and Water Conservation District, as far as maybe an incentive with a program that got us started there. We've been to a couple of farmer meetings where people were talking about cover crops and soil health and what could be done with it. I heard people saying that, you could farm without using fertilizer and all of this crazy stuff that could be done with cover crops and a soil health system. And I really just wanted to see if it would work on our acres. So part of it was curiosity, part of it was a program through NRCS and Soil and Water Conservation that helped offset some of the cost in the first couple years. And once we saw what it was doing on our ground, I was pretty much hooked. So, I mean, that's, curiosity combined with just wanting to see if we could achieve some of what was being claimed. And from there, that started the ball rolling, and it's just it's kept on going from there.
You're muted, Dave.
There we go. Jeremy, sorry about that. I muted myself. What about you? What prompted you to start?
Well, I don't know. This is a journey. I'm a fourth generation farmer here in West Texas. And however, I spent some time away from the farm after college, did some professional work, and farming's professional work too, but just kind of got away from the farm. And when I got back into the business and wanted to restart and kind of have new ideas, I created a mission statement for what we do here in my business. And that was to manage and steward the natural resources that God has given us to feed and clothe the world. And so as I looked at that mission statement, I started realizing, what does that really mean? How do we steward the land that we are entrusted with and make it sustainable long term? And that's really what got me on this journey of soil health, regenerative agriculture, and started reading a bunch of books, started really, following people like Gabe Brown and Ray Archuleta and all these different pioneers of regenerative agriculture, and tried to see how that works in a semi-arid, extremely dry climate, where rainfall is very limited. We have a little bit of irrigation, but it's limited. And so how do we do that? Also at that time, about half my acres that I farm is certified organic. When you look at the soil health principles and you look at regenerative agriculture, tillage is a part of that. And so I'm constantly challenged with how do we limit our tillage and organic production and have soil health our main goal. And so, yeah, it's a journey. I feel like that was back in 2008, 9, 10. Fast forward to where we are today, we're further down the road, but we're not yet where we still want to be. So I think it's just a passion for the land and what I do. And we want to create a safe, sustainable product into the future. And so I guess that's how we started on this journey.
Okay, so it's a journey. So it's curiosity and leading towards a journey. What about you, Jesse? And I see you're muted there, so you might want to mute yourself.
Yes, so I mean, our main driving force in the Delta in general anymore is fighting resistant pigweed, Palmer amaranth. So that's kind of what led us down this road of cover crops, and then we saw a lot more benefits to cover crops. But the first driving force was how can we fight resistant pigweed? We're running out of tools that are chemical tools, and maybe cover crop would aid us in that. And it has, and that's the main thing. And I'm just like everybody else. Farming is a social. It's a lifestyle. I want my kids to do this when they get old enough, and I also want my farm to still be here when they get old enough. So we are always looking for improved ROI, and what we've seen is cover crop kind of helps us limit some expenses.
Okay, good. Weed pressure. Okay. What, and our lone grazer here, Michael, what would prompted someone, you would think with grass out there, you wouldn't have an issue with soil health. What prompted you to do something?
Well, when I began with cattle, I was looking at what would make the most money. And I had a cousin that was doing rotational grazing. And I went to see his farm, and it just blew me away of what he was doing on his farm. And he explained soil health and how that works to benefit the bottom dollar. And so from there, I started going to workshops, getting involved with other farmers that were doing rotational grazing. Even got with a row crop farmer over in eastern Arkansas. We put cattle on his place that was doing cover crops. And it's kind of like the guy previously said, it's a journey, and you're learning more every day and see different things on your farm that needs improved, and cover crops definitely benefit. I've got one area on our property that I recently leased that was very poor. The extension service came out, and they're just shaking their heads about how poor the soil was. And so we've put cover crops, and we put cattle, and in 3 years, it's starting to really make a difference.
Okay, good. So yours was more of looking at somebody else's successes and wanting to try and copy that on your own operation there. Hey,
Exactly.
Rupert, how you doing?
Doing well. It's Wednesday.
There you go. Well, there you go. We've been going around asking folks what prompted you or them to get involved with trying to change their system and manage more in a soil health manner in the beginning back there whenever you started 5 or 6, 7 years ago.
Actually, I did some poking around, and corn was the crop I was most interested in. How could I increase my yields, help with water infiltration? Where I farm in South Carolina, it's pretty much sandy coastal plains. And I started out with a simple mix, which was peas, clover, and rye. The crop did pretty good over the winter. And my initial plan was to try to plant in it. And my uncle, who called himself helping me, he actually disked my cover crop down. And, I was a little upset about it, but I went ahead and proceeded anyway. And what I noticed when it was harvest time, I had bigger and longer ears. The kernels were definitely more dense. During the growing season, I poked around in the soil. I saw I had earthworms, which was something that's kind of uncommon for row crops. And when the yield came up, I think it was roughly, well, first of all, let me back up. I waited a little too long to harvest. I wanted to dry down in the field. And the deer and animals had run in and out of the field so much it seemed like they knocked every other stalk of corn down. But I ended up cutting, I think it was 110 bushels, and probably had another 70 bushels on the ground from the wildlife knocking stalk over.
Oh,
so
boy.
Seeing that in that particular field, that's what got me started with the cover cropping. And
Okay. So you were after crop improvement, quality, that type of thing. So you're going around, what was the first thing you did? Or if you were starting to recommend something to somebody, would you begin one practice at a time, or would you just throw every caution to the wind and start doing that? Maybe I'll start with you, Jeremy, on that, and we'll go around and get everybody's quick opinion on that.
Well, I think I would learn as much as you can. In production agriculture, our expenses are extremely high, and sometimes, where I farm, I've planted a lot of cover crop mixes and never got a rain to get them up. And so, I think it's important that you just learn that we have so much information at our fingertips nowadays. And so that's what I started doing, is just reading books, watching YouTube videos, and a lot of times, a lot of things that you see are in other areas that get a lot more rainfall. And so trying to tweak that. And then what I do in my operation is I start off small. Like I'll try it on a small part of our land and see how it works. And if it does work and it's doing exactly what I want, then we add more acres every year. I don't ever just go every acre. It just seems like I have done that, and that's been a failure.
Okay, so you start off small, you educate yourself. What about you, Jesse? What was your effort towards, especially towards your pigweed problem there.
Yeah, I mean, we educated ourselves. It seemed like when we first started talking about cover crop and kind of how to attack what we were going to do, most of the info was not cotton based, which is where most of our cover crop is. It was a lot of corn and soybeans. Cotton is definitely a crop that is a little more intensive to manage. You have to worry about pests and a few things. So we did it on small acres because we just didn't know what we were going to introduce, mainly insect pressure wise, when we start putting in some new blends and things. Started out with just grasses, since we would be a different crop out there, and just started branching out in some of the mixes recently. But that's kind of the way we started. It was 160 acres the first year. Now it's grown to over a couple thousand acres at this point.
Okay, all right. What about you, Rupert?
Well, I take a little different approach. I'd say first, know which fields you're going to experiment with. If you have existing issues such as compaction, if it holds the water, if it's dry, you have to identify that first. Because if you just go pedal to the metal, you may fail, and that will kind of discourage you from experimenting more with it. But once you know what you're dealing with, I'd say start small. Don't be afraid to try, and also talk with some of the other farmers in the area, because you may find out some of them are thinking or doing some of the same things, and you two can bounce ideas off of each other.
Okay, that's reasonable. What about you, Michael?
I recommend getting a mentor. I had a cousin that got me started, and I bounced ideas off him, and then as I went to workshops and met other farmers that were doing the same thing, I'd quiz them about different things that they were doing on their farms. And field days are excellent to go to see what others are doing. And in a few years, since I've been doing that, now I've got people calling me, asking me questions. I don't always have the answers, but we try to figure out things that would work and don't work. And I also suggest experimenting, small scale, and see if it works, and then go from there.
Okay. Well, let me keep going here. So I hear it takes a long time to get changing soil health or get changes that you see it. I don't believe that personally. I'm just curious, Zeb, what's been your observation? How long before you started to see a change that you could tell as a farmer was taking place? And what was that change that you saw taking place?
I mean, for us, we started to see changes in the first year. Depending on which metric you're trying to measure, there's stuff that can take years before you see, a change in organic matter or something like that. Can be slower to come around. If you're out there poking around in the field and kind of paying attention to what's going on in your soil, you're going to start to see some changes in the first year. Maybe even in the first couple months. Rupert mentioned seeing earthworms in his first year. You're going to see worms. You're going to see a lot more life in your soil. If you start to feed that soil with the cover crops and keeping that living root and, the biomass that you've got above and below ground, you'll really see stuff starting to move back into your fields. So we saw, worms, we saw the insects and all grades of different, biology, different types of biology that came back into our soil in that first year, as well as water infiltration really increased for us in that first year compared to places where we weren't using cover crops. So, that's, and weed suppression as well. As I think it was Jeremy, or no, I'm forgetting the name now, sorry. On the pigweed suppression, that was an issue for us as well. So, weed suppression and moisture retention are probably the first two things that I think a farmer will notice, along with the amount of life that really quickly comes back into their soils.
Okay. Jesse, I see you shaking your head there. What, would you have something else to add to that, or?
Yeah, I mean, we saw benefits very quickly. I mean, definitely within the first couple months, we put our cover crop on our heaviest pigweed infested field, and also one of the most sandiest. And, that within, 6 weeks of the crop being up, we were having pigweed escapes in other parts of the farm, and this farm was still holding pretty clean. And then by middle of the summer, our pivot had made about one less circle than our other pivots. So you can see change pretty fast.
So you're actually using less water, documented by the number of trips or applications with
that's
irrigation?
right.
Okay.
Yes, we're about circle and a half less a year on our pivots that are cover crop. Right now, we're doing some furrow irrigation, and on our blend 40, we are 2 less furrow irrigations as of today on it for this year.
Okay, well, that'll make Maura happy since she's documenting you're using less water in agriculture. That's a good thing. What about out there in your dry area, Jeremy? Did you, I realize you get less water, so your changes would be coming about less. Would that make sense? Or?
Yeah, I think so. I think being a dry climate, the changes are not as fast. I'll never forget. When Gabe Brown came out, spent a day with me. He told me something. I'm not going to lie to you. You farm in a really tough environment. We don't have just some things that it's just the environment that we farm in. But I am seeing changes. Water holding capacity, water infiltration. We're seeing earthworms in our non-organic land. We're really not tilling the soil. It's not as fast as I'd like at times. But we just stay with it and stay focused. And I think a lot of that just is the fact that it's a really dry climate.
Yeah. Rupert or Michael, would you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, one of the things that I noticed in my area going to the diversity, I had a lot of predator insects that I noticed, ladybugs, praying mantises, wolf spiders, and others. And that actually, because of that, I cut back some of my pesticide applications, and I've noticed that the insects kind of took care of each other. And that was a nice, pleasant surprise. Now, I don't think it will be like that every year, but there are some years you would probably be able to cut back or either eliminate some of these pesticide applications or insecticides.
Michael, that's a good thing there, Rupert. But Michael, you got anything?
Well, I really noticed that the first dry season that we went through, that the grass stayed longer, had a better root system with the rest periods that I give it. And when other people were feeding hay after a drought, I was grazing.
Okay. Better utilization of the water that became available to you.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how your changes have affect your other strategies like nutrients. I think Zeb had mentioned something about that. Have you been able to eliminate all your fertilizer, Zeb, or kind of give us the scoop on how that's the truth behind that as far as related to your operation?
Not yet. We're 8-9 years into this so far, and we've not eliminated all of our synthetic fertilizer. We are reaching a point now where we're able to cut back a little bit. Corn is one of my easiest things to test nitrogen use and what we're getting out of our fertility budget in there. And in corn, we've been able to take somewhere around a third of our total nitrogen out on repeated trials so far and not see our yields suffer. So we're maintaining our yield. We're using, maybe a third less of our synthetic nitrogen and still able to maintain yields in those plots that we're doing. I haven't taken it across all of our acres yet. I'm still trying to prove it to myself. But, we are seeing places where we can start to cut back on our fertility and maintain, our yield and our economics and the profit of our farm.
How about you, Jeremy? Where you're standing on the fertilizer issue?
Yeah, I think we have cut back. I think one of the lessons I've learned is understand your context, understand where you're farming. Nitrogen is not my most limiting resource, water is. And so, realizing that we have cut back, we mainly grow cotton. I grow a lot of other crops, but my main crop is cotton. And if we can have a legume in that mix, the previous year, we for sure cut back on fertility. Of course, on the organic land that we have, our cover crops is the only fertility that we use. And so, that's what we're going to get. But like I said, if your main limiting factor is just water, we use fertility when it looks like the conditions are going to give us the opportunity to maximize that. So,
Rupert, do you have any comments on that, or what are you doing down there in your coastal plain soils related to nutrients?
Well, the soil is so porous, we have to keep applying nutrients. There are some years, if we get adequate rain, where you can reduce it some, but we're still on the fertilizer.
Okay. And Michael, I know a lot of chicken litter is applied to grazing land. I'm just curious what you're doing down there. Are you still doing that, or how's that figure in?
No, we don't use any chicken litter on our farm. When I started, only thing we're using is the cow manure and urine, and that's doing really well. The only thing that I've really applied is lime to our ground, but yeah, no fertilizer.
Okay. Wayne, at the start of the annual meeting there mentioned carbon, organic matter, and I'm just curious, maybe go around, have you all measuring carbon or organic matter in your soil testing, and or where are we at on that as far as up or down, or where are we going with that? Because Zeb, I know you've had some good luck with increasing organic matter.
As far as the tests that we're seeing that are run here through our Department of Ag, I'm not seeing my organic matter percentages move a whole lot. Definitely not leaps and bounds, but they will move a tick here and there. What I can say is that the top layers of my soil are turning quite a bit darker than they were when we started. So I'm kind of attributing that to the carbon that we're managing to put back in through roots, through the biomass that we're leaving on top of the soil. We're not necessarily seeing it in reports, but my eyes are telling me that we're making some changes there, and we are being able to improve that. Whereas before we might have had an inch or so of a really dark layer on top of the soil, now we're seeing it go down 5 and 6 inches, maybe a little more on some of our better land.
Okay. Rupert, have you seen any changes in your down there?
I have, like Zeb said, the top few inches have changed. I'd say maybe 3 or 4, but outside of that and the biology, no. But it's very slow because we have very coarse soils and a lot of heat and humidity.
Okay. All right. Is anybody else seeing any positive impact increases? Jesse, Jeremy, or?
No, right now our organic matter stayed the same, but really we're only 4 to 5 years into this thing.
Yeah.
I think it takes several years to really see a statistic increase on it.
Yeah, I think people are forgetting to increase organic matter, you have to raise organic matter, and that's why you have to implement a systematic approach there. You brought up a benefits there as a question came in, Jesse, about your controlling pigweed using cover crops. Can you talk a little bit about that, how you did that and what cover crop you used to do that?
Yeah, so we started out with cereal rye at 50 pounds, kind of what we've done the last several years. It's kind of been standard for us. This year we mixed in some hairy vetch in the field. We planted green this year on a lot more crop. I think I'm struggling right now with, I don't know, I kind of have this concept where there may be 2 ways to go on this fight. If you're going to fight pigweed with cover crop, you're going to need to be pretty thick. And in our part of the world, we were so thick this year with cool weather, it introduced some issues we hadn't seen yet. So, but for the soil health aspect, I think I can go lighter on my cover crop and maybe not fight some of the issues we've had this year on it. And even lighter, I'm still gonna get some pigweed help. It's not completely perfect, but between that and residuals and things, the tools we have with herbicides, we can do a pretty good job on it.
Zeb, have you had something similar experience or anything related to any problems with resistant weeds over your way?
We do. We fight pigweed pretty hard as well. And I mean, any kind of cover that you're putting out there, it doesn't have to be thick. It doesn't have to be a full carpet out there to be able to help with pigweed or even control it. And, you know, we've seen some of the same stuff that Jesse just said. Then I'd rather think I had too little cover crop out there than too much. And we fought that many years, especially in cotton production, to try to be able to get that seed in the ground through that mat of cover is really a challenge. And then if it turns off wet, you know, we've had some crop failures due to having too much cover crop. So that's a dance that we're still kind of trying to learn where that perfect line is, and has led to some of our changes in management as far as how we're establishing cover crops, and cutting back on our rates maybe to try to find that balance. But I mean, it doesn't take 10,000 pounds of above ground biomass to cut down on pigweed.
Okay. Well, let's kind of move into that discussion on cover crops for the next few minutes. What cover crops are you using, and how are you going about selecting them? You know, I'm in your rotation, you got corn, cotton, peanuts, or whatever. And then how do you decide how much seed to use? That's always the question, because of course, the more seed you use, the more cost it is. And how do you determine that's good enough and that's successful? So I'll just throw it out there. Maybe start with you, Rupert, and get your idea on that.
I have two, what I call standard mixes that I use, which would be a rye, triticale, or oats, vetch, peas, clover, and a radish. And then I add or subtract to that, depending on what crop is going to follow. One year I had a 10-way mix, and I really liked what that did, but economically that's not feasible to do all the time. And then for the summer, I do something like a, goodness, I'm drawing a blank now. I have a summer mix, which has, gosh, I'm drawing a blank. But I have 4 species in that. And those are pretty standard for me. And again, I just add and subtract depending on what's following it.
Okay. What about Jeremy? You got any hints on, I know your selection of cover crops be a little different out there. And does moisture play a role in that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's, for us, it's a timing issue. You know, cotton harvest goes into, you know, October, November, December. By that time, you're really limited on what cover crop you can plant. You're really limited down to cereal rye. We plant a lot of cereal rye out here. We are interseeding a lot of covers in end of August, 1st September. We've got an intercrop on dryland production where the cotton's not real big. We can go in there and plant covers in between the rows of cotton. That's something we started last year. And if we can do that, we'll plant cereal rye, hairy vetch, and a tillage radish or rape or something like that. A lot of my land is rotated with the small grain. And so if we've got a wheat crop, winter crop, we'll harvest that. If we get a summer rain, we'll try to plant a summer warm season mix. But man, that's just a timing issue. It just seems like, you know, getting there at the right time and being able to capture as much benefits from those cover crops. I think that's what you're hearing from everybody. It's not as easy as you think it is. You know, just throw a bunch of seed out. No, that doesn't work, especially in a dry climate. And so what we're trying to do is find tools that we can, like I said, interseed. That way the seed is already there. When we do get those rains, for us out here in West Texas, we normally get a rainy season in the month of September. And so, man, if I can have those cover crops either slung out, we do that. We sling them out over the top of cotton, or with our intercrop seeder, cover crop seeder, then they'll be growing. We'll be stripping or harvesting cotton on top of a cover crop. That's the ideal situation. Doesn't always work out that way. So yeah, my philosophy on my land, if we're not growing a cash crop, we're growing a cover crop if we can. And so just trying to make that work. Doesn't always work, but that's our goal.
Okay. I'm just curious, as far as grazing there, Michael, do you have a prescription that you're using, or do you just manage your grass, or are you actually grazing some cover crops?
Well, I can't say that it's cover crop, but it's cool season forages for me because my ground's already covered.
Okay, there you go.
But hairy vetch is one of my favorites. Cows love it. They thrive on it. They look good. I usually put about 30 pounds per acre of hairy vetch, about 30 pounds of a mix of wheat, rye, oats, and about 5 pounds of crimson clover. And that seems to really work. And I'm farming about 400 acres, and I rotate my pastures every year on which fields get the cover or the forage, cool season forage.
So you're
And
introducing that, you're seeding that on an annual basis? You're using annuals for that?
yes, annuals. Yes, sir.
Just
Yep.
drilling it in, using a drill?
Yeah, no till drill. And we just use it from the conservation district. We get it every year in the fall, and we'll start grazing.
You're kind of breaking up there, Michael.
Those forages.
Okay,
And it really cuts her hay back.
okay. Is anybody in the other panel or doing any grazing on livestock or have any plans to try that in the future?
We do. So if we get the cover crop established during those winter months, before we get into like April, we typically try to graze if we have a cover that was well established. Like I said, every year is so different, but if we can graze it, we will. So
when we're talking grazing, Jeremy, are we taking everything, or what are you doing? How do you know when to move the cows and keep them on, or just leave them on there and let them get everything?
yeah, well, typically the grazing, what it looks like for us. So if we planted the cover crop in December, we'll move the cows on February. They'll graze for about 2 months, and then we move them off. So it's a really quick deal. So it just kind of varies. I mean, gosh, one thing I've learned in all this is no year is the same. And man, what worked last year, or it's just every year's so different, and it's challenging at the same time. And so, but man, I'm trying to integrate livestock. Let's just take last year, for example. We were in a drought. We had a little bit of land that had a warm season cover crop mix. And if we could, we put cows on there. We moved the cows off. We got a September rain. It grew back. We moved sheep on. The sheep grazed it. And so that piece of land got grazed twice. And then now it's growing cotton. So, but this, it just changes so much every year. That's what in this process, it's just, I don't know, every year is so different. It kind of can make you go crazy, but you just kind of have to work with the conditions that you got and take advantage of that opportunity. For me, we just try to take advantage of the rain and get something growing.
Okay.
So
We got a few questions come in. We just got about 5 or 6 minutes left. What about landowners? I'm assuming some of you are rented land. What's been, are you getting any pushback from them or any encouragement, or how can we, get an increase in the adoption of soil health management systems on leased land? So Jesse, I see you're shaking your head there. Maybe you got some ideas on that, or.
Yeah, I mean, we're blessed to farm on Judd Hill Plantation Farm. That's actually it's a trustee based. Most of the money gets donated back to UAMS, Arkansas State. So there is kind of the place where I can experiment and mess up and not hurt a landowner quite as bad because the way it's set up. But that's our fight right now, and that's why we're actually doing a big study this year on ROI, and we're all crop share here in our part of the world for the most part. So if it's cash rent and the farmer's doing okay, then it's not really going to affect the landowner. But if I can save money for myself, but my yield goes down, then on the crop share side, the landowner doesn't like that. So we're trying to prove that we can do these things, be sustainable, cut our costs, and still make the same yield. And that's I think where it would be adapted quicker if we can put this stuff on paper and put numbers to it and kind of let people see, here's what we did and here's what it cost us, or here's what it made us. So that's the fight we're trying to do.
Zeb, have you got any renting ground, Zeb? I'm not sure. You have to deal with maps.
Yes, sir. We do have rented ground, but everything in our area is pretty much done on cash rent. So like Jesse said, that pretty much leaves it up to me and up to my budget as far as whether it's making me money or costing me money. I've been lucky. All of my landlords have been willing to let me farm ugly, as my grandfather said, on their land when we started all of this. And they've come to see the wildlife benefits. So for the few landowners I have who like to hunt, they've got more wildlife habitat than they did before. So that's a plus. It doesn't necessarily come back to my bottom line, but it does make them happy.
Okay. Well, you guys both hinted at it. So are you making money? You always hear, well, cost to cover crops, that's an expenditure. I can't afford to do that. But I'm assuming you all must be making some money, otherwise you wouldn't be doing it. Any thoughts on that? Go ahead,
Yeah,
Jesse.
that's what we've seen, and I haven't put a pen or paper to it. On our cover crop system, basically we're doing everything the same way as I'm doing my conventional till, but I'm spending somewhere around $20 an extra an acre on cover crop. So at the end of the day, I need to be able to say I'm making one less circle on a pivot. I'm probably saving one less insecticide pass. Herbicides are a little cheaper. I know they are. I don't have it on pen and paper. And so that's what we're trying to do at this point, is saying, here's exactly what the bottom line is. And if you do it, you do have a chance to make more money than conventional till.
So you might benefit from a system that allows you to capture that information a little more readily available to you.
Yeah. And it's a moving target, year to year, everything changes, but
Yeah.
I really do feel we're saving $20 to $30 an acre throughout the year, and it's at least a net zero, and we're being more sustainable and helping the environment. And if we can do that, then that's a plus in my book.
What about you, Rupert? You making any money?
I'd also say check with your local farm office and NRCS, because sometimes they may have programs that can help offset some of the cost of cover cropping to get farmers to start or either just take on the practice.
Okay.
But overall, it works in my budget overall.
Okay. Jeremy, you got any thoughts on that?
Well, first on the landowner deal, that's been a challenge for me out here. I had a piece of land that we did a lot of regenerative practices on, but really felt like we were going further down the road, and then the land sells. And the first thing the farmer did was destroy everything I worked 10 years for. That's really discouraging. So I'm almost to the point now that if I'm with the practices that I'm doing this stuff on is the land that I either cash lease or own myself. Retired farmers probably the ones that give me the biggest problems because it's totally different than the way they farmed. But I think for us out here, it's when you start focusing on dollars per acre rather than yield. Farmers out here, we're notorious to chase big yields. Look at me, I made so much cotton per acre, and I just try to focus on dollars per acre. And if I can make a lower yield on less inputs, which is my goal, because like I said, I just need a rain. I need a rain at the right time, and we can make decent amount of cotton and make a decent living. And so I'm a low input farmer and I use the cover crops as my fertility. So, I hope to be making money. Some years are better than others. The drought's been really rough on us the previous 2 years. Now we're kind of had a weird year this year where it turned extremely wet. But those are the two thoughts I had on the landowner. The landowners are really retired farmers are the ones that give me the biggest headache at times. So.
Okay, well, that kind of gets back to the policy changing that I think Maura mentioned earlier. There needs to be some things. Now, this has got about 30 seconds, folks. So recommendations, we got researchers out there listening in. What one or thing would you might have that you say, man, I really need some information to help support me in my decision to do this related to soil health? Anybody got a last minute stab at that, or before we turn this back over to Wayne there? Apparently, surely we need researchers out there.
I can't believe we're doing it all right yet, fellas.
I think anything that can be done to get local plots and local tests done through whether it be through your ag colleges or whether it be through extension. But anything that can get the results of what cover crops can do out in front of farmers where they can, see it, touch it, feel it. I think that's going to be the biggest thing, because the knee-jerk reaction when people hear about a lot of this is just that it can't be done.
Right.
So anything you can do to increase exposure and get that out in front of farmers, I think would be the biggest thing, just to prove that, it can be done. It's not easy, but it's not magic either.
Great. That's really good advice, because all biology is local, right?
Exactly right.
Thank you all very much. Well, listen, Dave, Zeb, Jeremy, Jesse, Michael, Rupert, thank you all so much. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to join us and to enlighten us.